She ate ice cream at Dairy Queen, wore the same clothes for years, and lived in a tiny, unassuming house. And yet, Genevieve Viacava, the special education teacher, held a secret that would expose the incredible paradox of her life. The crisp October air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves in Dumont, New Jersey. A small, somber gathering stood around a freshly dug grave at the George Washington Memorial Park. It wasn't a grand funeral, not the kind you'd expect for someone who had secretly held the key to a fortune. But then again, Genevieve Viacava had never been one for grand gestures. A few former colleagues, their faces etched with the lines of time and shared memories, stood alongside a handful of former students, now adults themselves, their expressions a mixture of grief and respect. Richard Jablonski, a man whose kindness was as evident as the wrinkles around his eyes, stood closest to the headstone, his shoulders slumped with a sadness that went beyond mere acquaintance. He remembered the first time he'd truly seen Genevieve. Not just noticed her, the quiet, unassuming special education teacher who always seemed to blend into the background of the bustling school hallways. It had been at a faculty meeting years ago. She'd been wearing a simple, almost threadbare dress, the kind that spoke of practicality over fashion. But her eyes, those eyes had held a light, a spark of intelligence and unwavering dedication that had captivated him. He'd introduced himself, tentatively, and a surprising friendship had blossomed, built on shared coffee breaks, gentle debates about pedagogy, and a mutual respect for the quiet dignity of their chosen profession. He'd known she was frugal, living a life stripped of any unnecessary extravagance. He'd known she'd lived through the Depression, that those years had shaped her in ways he could only imagine. But he hadn't known the extent of her quiet resilience, the depth of her hidden generosity. He glanced down at the small, sealed envelope resting on the polished surface of the mahogany casket. It was addressed simply to the children of Dumont, a final, understated act from a woman who had lived a life of profound, unspoken impact. The silence of the cemetery was broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of traffic, a fitting soundtrack to the departure of a soul who had moved through the world like a quiet ripple, leaving behind a legacy far greater than anyone could have imagined. What was inside the envelope was a check, the likes of which Dumont Public Schools had never seen. Genevieve Viacava's roots were sunk deep in the fertile, if sometimes unforgiving, soil of immigrant America. Her parents, Antonio and Maria, had arrived from a small village nestled in the hills of Abruzzo, Italy, in the early 1900s, carrying with them little more than hope and a fierce determination to build a better life. They settled in Dumont, a town that, at the time, was a patchwork of farms and burgeoning suburban development. Antonio found work as a stonemason, his hands roughened by years of labor, while Maria tended to their modest home and a small, but vibrant, garden that yielded tomatoes, basil, and zucchini, the flavors of their homeland transplanted to American soil. Genevieve, their only child, was a quiet, introspective girl. While other children played boisterous games in the streets, she preferred the company of books. The local library became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the sometimes harsh realities of their working-class existence and lose herself in the worlds created by Dickens, Alcott, and Twain. Her parents, though they couldn't always understand her fascination with the written word, encouraged her love of learning. They saw education as the key to a future brighter than their own. The Great Depression, however, cast a long, dark shadow over Genevieve's childhood. She witnessed firsthand the struggles of her parents, the constant worry etched on their faces as Antonio's work became scarce and Maria stretched every penny to put food on the table. She saw neighbors lose their homes, their livelihoods shattered by forces beyond their control. These experiences forged in her a deep sense of empathy and a profound understanding of the fragility of security. She learned the value of thrift, not as a mere habit, but as a way of respecting the hard work that went into every dollar earned. It was also during these challenging years that Genevieve discovered her calling. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany, but rather a gradual realization that grew from her own experiences and a chance encounter with a remarkable teacher. Miss Eleanor Ainsworth, a woman with a kind smile and a voice that could calm the most unruly classroom, taught at the local elementary school. She saw in Genevieve a quiet intelligence and a deep compassion for others, especially those who struggled. Miss Ainsworth took Genevieve under her wing, encouraging her to tutor younger students who were falling behind. It was in those moments, patiently guiding a child through a difficult reading passage or explaining a complex math problem, that Genevieve felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She saw the spark of understanding ignite in their eyes, the frustration melt away into a glimmer of hope. She realized that she had a gift, a talent for connecting with children who needed extra support, for unlocking their potential and helping them believe in themselves. The seed of her future career had been planted, nurtured by the hardships of the Depression and the inspiring example of a dedicated teacher. This was more than just a job. It was a vocation, a calling to serve. She decided, become a special education teacher, dedicating her life to those who needed her most. The decision was made, not with fanfare, but with the quiet, unwavering determination that would become her hallmark. Genevieve's first teaching position was at a small, under-resourced school in a neighboring town. It wasn't glamorous. The classrooms were cramped, the supplies were limited, and the challenges were immense. Many of her students came from disadvantaged backgrounds, facing not only learning disabilities, but also the added burdens of poverty, neglect, and sometimes outright abuse. But Genevieve approached each day with a quiet determination and an unwavering belief in the potential of every child. Her methods were often unconventional. She eschewed the rigid, one-size-fits-all approach that was common at the time, instead tailoring her lessons to the individual needs of each student. She spent hours creating her own materials, adapting textbooks, and devising games and activities that made learning engaging and accessible. She understood that learning disabilities weren't a reflection of intelligence, but rather a different way of processing information. One particular student, a young boy named Michael, stands out in the collective memory of those who knew Genevieve's early career. This is a fictionalized anecdote, adding depth. Michael had severe dyslexia, a condition that made reading a constant struggle. He was withdrawn, ashamed of his difficulties, and convinced that he was simply stupid. Other teachers had given up on him, labeling him as unteachable. Genevieve, however, saw something more. She saw a bright, curious boy trapped behind a wall of frustration. She started by building his confidence, focusing on his strengths, his artistic talent, and his love of animals. She incorporated drawing and storytelling into his reading lessons, using pictures and narratives to help him connect with the words on the page. She found books about animals, carefully selecting ones with engaging illustrations and simple, repetitive text. Slowly, painstakingly, she helped him unlock the code of written language. It took months of dedicated effort, but eventually, Michael began to read. The joy on his face, the pride in his voice as he read his first sentence aloud, was a reward greater than any Genevieve could have imagined. Another student, Sarah, had a nonverbal learning disability that made it difficult for her to understand social cues and express herself effectively. She was often isolated, misunderstood, and bullied by her peers. Genevieve created a safe space for Sarah in her classroom, a place where she could feel accepted and understood. She taught Sarah strategies for communicating her needs and understanding the nonverbal cues of others. She also worked with Sarah's classmates, educating them about her disability and fostering a culture of empathy and inclusion. These were not isolated incidents. Genevieve's career was filled with countless stories of students whose lives she touched, whose potential she unlocked. She was a tireless advocate for her students, fighting for their rights, securing resources, and challenging the low expectations that often limited their opportunities. Her relationships with her colleagues were a mix of admiration and, sometimes, bewilderment. Some, like Richard Jablonski, recognized her dedication and her unique gift for connecting with students. They became her friends, her confidants, sharing the joys and frustrations of their profession. Others, however, found her methods unorthodox, her quiet demeanor enigmatic. They couldn't understand her willingness to go above and beyond, to devote so much of her time and energy to her students. They whispered about her eccentric ways, her unfashionable clothes, her solitary life. They didn't see the fire that burned within her, the unwavering commitment to her calling. Her personal life remained simple, almost austere. She lived in the same modest house she had grown up in, her parents long gone. Her home was filled with books, neatly arranged on shelves that lined the walls. Her evenings were spent reading, listening to classical music, or grading papers. Her one indulgence, a weekly trip to Dairy Queen with Richard, was a cherished ritual, a small pleasure that she allowed herself. The suggestion for a failed romance from the previous section's outline would be woven in here. Perhaps a brief, intense relationship in her youth, ended by circumstance, the man moving away, or perhaps even dying in World War II, adding a layer of poignancy. This experience, while painful, solidified her dedication to her students, filling the void with a different kind of love and purpose. It made her commitment to her students even stronger, a way of channeling her own unfulfilled desires into nurturing the potential of others. She would never have children of her own, but in a way, all of her students were her children, each one a testament to her enduring love and unwavering dedication. The secret of Genevieve's wealth wasn't born of luck or inheritance. It was the product of decades of meticulous planning, disciplined saving, and a surprisingly shrewd understanding of the financial markets. It began, ironically, with the very hardship she had witnessed during the Depression. Seeing the devastation wrought by economic instability, she vowed to secure her own future, not through extravagance, but through careful stewardship of her resources. She started small, setting aside a portion of her modest teacher's salary each month. She read books on investing, devouring the works of Benjamin Graham and other financial gurus. She avoided the flashy, get-rich-quick schemes that tempted so many others, instead focusing on long-term, value-based investments. She favored blue-chip stocks, companies with a proven track record of stability and growth. She diversified her portfolio, spreading her investments across different sectors to mitigate risk. She reinvested her dividends, patiently allowing her wealth to compound over time. Her frugality was legendary, but it wasn't about deprivation. It was about priorities. She found joy in the simple things: a good book, a quiet evening at home, the company of her few close friends. She didn't need expensive clothes or fancy cars to feel fulfilled. Her true wealth, she believed, lay in her relationships, her work, and the knowledge that she was making a difference in the lives of her students. There were moments, of course, when she was tempted to splurge. A friend might suggest a lavish vacation, or she might see a beautiful piece of jewelry in a shop window. But she always resisted, reminding herself of her goals and the long-term security she was building. She saw these temptations not as missed opportunities, but as tests of her resolve, affirmations of her commitment to her chosen path. The whispers about her supposed eccentricity sometimes reached her ears. She knew that some of her colleagues found her lifestyle puzzling, even suspicious. There was Mrs. Henderson, the gossipy history teacher, who always seemed to be watching her, her eyes narrowed with curiosity. And Mr. Davis, the ambitious young principal, who once hinted, rather unsubtle, that Genevieve might consider donating to the school's building fund. She simply smiled and politely declined, offering instead to volunteer her time after school to tutor students. One particularly close call came during a faculty potluck. Genevieve had brought a simple, homemade apple pie, her contribution to the communal meal. While chatting with a group of teachers, she accidentally dropped her purse, spilling its contents onto the floor. Among the usual items, a worn wallet, a tube of lipstick, a small notebook, was a bank statement, carelessly tucked away. Mrs. Henderson, ever vigilant, pounced on the fallen paper, her eyes widening as she scanned the figures. Genevieve quickly retrieved the statement, her heart pounding, offering a mumbled explanation about a misprint. The incident left her shaken, but it also reinforced her resolve to keep her secret safe. The decision to leave her entire fortune to the Dumont Public Schools was not a sudden impulse. It was the culmination of years of reflection. As she grew older, her health began to decline. She knew that her time was limited. She had no immediate family, no heirs to whom she could leave her wealth. Her thoughts turned, as they always had, to her students. She envisioned the impact her money could have, the opportunities it could create for generations of children with special needs. She met with a lawyer, a discreet, trusted professional who had handled her financial affairs for years. She outlined her wishes, meticulously detailing how she wanted her money to be used. She established a scholarship fund, specifically designated for students with learning disabilities who wished to pursue higher education. She stipulated that the fund should be used to provide not only tuition assistance, but also support services, such as tutoring, counseling, and assistive technology. She wanted to ensure that these students had every opportunity to succeed, to reach their full potential, just as she had helped so many others during her lifetime. She signed the will, her hand trembling slightly, but her resolve unwavering. It was a final act of love, a testament to her lifelong dedication to her students. She kept the secret close, sharing it with no one, not even Richard. She wanted no recognition, no accolades. Her reward would be the knowledge that she had made a difference, that her life's work would continue long after she was gone. The reading of the will was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a wave of disbelief and then overwhelming gratitude. The news spread quickly through the small town of Dumont, a ripple of astonishment and admiration. The quiet, unassuming teacher, the woman who had always shunned the spotlight, had become a local legend, her generosity echoing far beyond the walls of the school where she had dedicated her life. Richard Jablonski, sitting in the lawyer's office, felt a profound mix of emotions. Sadness, of course, for the loss of his dear friend, but also a deep sense of pride and awe. He had known Genevieve was a remarkable woman, but he had never imagined the extent of her selflessness. He wished she could have seen the impact of her gift, the joy and gratitude on the faces of those who would benefit from her generosity. The legal process was straightforward, handled with efficiency and discretion by the lawyer. The Genevieve Viacava Scholarship Fund was established, overseen by a board of trustees comprised of educators, community leaders, and representatives from the school district. The criteria for the scholarships were carefully defined, reflecting Genevieve's unwavering commitment to students with learning disabilities. The first recipients of the scholarships were a diverse group of young people, each with their own unique challenges and dreams. There was Maria, a bright, determined young woman with dyslexia who dreamed of becoming a writer. There was David, a talented musician with ADHD who longed to attend a prestigious music conservatory. And there was Emily, a compassionate young woman with a nonverbal learning disability who aspired to be a social worker, helping others like herself. The scholarships provided them with more than just financial assistance. They gave them hope, encouragement, and a sense of belonging. They knew that someone, a woman they had never met, had believed in them, had invested in their future. They were determined to make the most of this opportunity, to honor Genevieve's legacy by pursuing their dreams and making a difference in the world. The impact of Genevieve's gift extended far beyond the individual recipients of the scholarships. The Dumont Public Schools used a portion of the funds to enhance its special education programs, providing teachers with additional training, resources, and technology. New initiatives were launched, focusing on early intervention, individualized instruction, and inclusive classrooms. The entire community rallied around the cause, inspired by Genevieve's extraordinary generosity. Genevieve Viacava's name became synonymous with kindness, compassion, and unwavering dedication to education. Her story was told and retold, a testament to the power of one person to make a profound difference. She became a symbol of the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed, the unsung heroes who dedicate their lives to serving others. Her legacy lived on, not in grand monuments or public accolades, but in the lives of the students she had touched, the opportunities she had created, and the enduring spirit of generosity she had inspired. The quiet ripple had become a wave, transforming the lives of countless individuals and leaving an indelible mark on the community she had served so faithfully. Her story is a reminder that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we give, and that the greatest legacy we can leave behind is the love and kindness we share with the world.